My name's Rossa Gibbons, and I'm living here in Monig is the townland, and it's right next to Lochine Special Area Conservation. Land here kind of goes up to Quilcha land, and then it goes around the corner, and that's National Parks and Wildlife there. It's about 1 kilometre from Lochine. And I have 3 sets of forestry here. I have some 20-year-old stuff up by the yard. That was larch and oak on the good land, and ash and alder on the poorer land. And that was planted about 20 years ago, so that's just come out of grant aid. And then 7 years ago, I planted, you can just see those birch trees there in next door. So there's mixed broadleaves in there. That's 7 or 8 years old, probably 8 years old now. And that's about 10 or 12 species in there too. And the third plot then I have is here. There's 2 halves. We're down here by a stream. There's land rising up this way, and there's land rising up this way where the bales are. And there's 2.4 hectares there. So each plot is about 2.5 hectares. And this agroforestry is 4 years old now. And my motivation, I suppose, was as my 20-year-old woodland matured. I'm a tree surgeon by trade, so I'm lucky enough to have the skill set to deal with the timber myself and to use saws. But what I really noticed as the woodland matured is the availability of grazing, how much light was coming through the canopy and how much grazing was still on the forest floor. I was also unhappy with the service I got from contractors 20 years ago for 2 reasons. The main reason was they dug trench, and they have a trench and mound system where you bring in a digger and you dig trenches, and each bucket load of earth you take out of the trench, you make a mound. The lads come along and plant into the mound. And it's a system really that's designed around a harvester coming in to do all the work rather than, the landowner doing it themselves. And it really slows down from a management perspective. It makes everything really difficult and awkward and slow because you're forever bound to these rows and trenches that you can't really go across. So I was really unhappy with that system. And the second thing I was unhappy with was the provenance of the oak. Provenance is like your genetic, your ancestry, like a pedigree dog or a pedigree bull or whatever you like these pedigree Shropshires. So I don't believe, I don't know where the contractors got their oak, but it's a 110-year investment, and they're planting sort of poor quality oak. So I was unhappy with these 2 things. So the next bit of woodland I did, thanks to Eugene Curran's help, and I did that myself, and I sourced all the trees with a good provenance up in from my nurseries, and no trenches, and that's coming along lovely now. Back to the grade, the light penetration that I could see in my 20-year-old woodland, and same in the 8-year-old stuff. I could see there was still plenty of grazing in there, that the trees didn't just close up the canopy straight away. So then through Eugene's influence again, I started doing a bit of research on agroforestry. And I had 1 field of pasture left, this 2.5 hectare field here. So decided to plant the agroforestry. During COVID, I went away and did a master's in forestry. And over the 2 years of modules, I did a module on agroforestry and started to understand its benefits and what it really meant. And for my dissertation then, it was a year-long dissertation, a bit like it was like a 12,000 word document. I decided to do qualitative research, so I did interviews with West Cork and Kerry sheep farmers to talk to them about agroforestry and to see what are the risks and uncertainties for them. So as I was writing the paper, obviously I was having to read a lot more. So the benefits of agroforestry, became really evident. So one of the papers that I cited was a paper discussing lamb mortality and how we have a 50% increase in lamb survival rates when lambs are born outside in agroforestry. And the primary reason, as I studied, the primary reason I was happy to plant the agroforestry was not necessarily for long-term provision of timber, but for short-term provision of services, ecosystem services. So things like erosion, nutrient cycling, flood mitigation, shade and shelter, all of the other benefits that you get from having agroforestry on your pasture. And I suppose it's all about the soil. And we know that trees create soil. So as far as I could see, it was a no-brainer. If my contractor can come in and still cut haylage, and all the while the trees are making soil, then it's a win-win situation for me. I'm an organic farmer, and the idea in the long term is to produce organic lamb from this West Cork pasture here. We're very lucky in West Cork that we have the place is full of foodies, lots of interesting people, as you know, in West Cork, and loads of small cottage industries, loads of people producing different niche products, really nice cheeses. So the idea is to sell the lamb locally. I invested in a small flock of Shropshires with the idea that Shropshires are tree-friendly sheep. And although they will nibble at lower branches if they get the opportunity to eat some lower branches, they'll nibble at the branches, but what they won't do is ring bark the trees, in my experience of them. So the idea was that once I do a bit more thinning in my 20-year-old woodland, that I could rotate my Shropshires in there to keep the place clear. I have them only 3 years now. It was the year after I planted the agroforestry that I got them, and very happy with them. They're lovely, friendly animals, and they're fairly hardy and easygoing. The haylage, I've 18 bales here, and I guess I'll probably need 6 only for the ewes when they're lambing inside. So I might sell 10 and keep 8. Sell about half of it, and that might that'll probably pay for the contractors. So I get the haylage for nothing really, just for the work. My contractor, who was going to be cutting the haylage and baling it for me, and I said, "What do you think about 8 meters?" And he thought that 8 meters was fine as long as we had enough headland, so that as the tractor came down and turned, he'd be able to turn no bother and get two swards, a cut up and a cut down, so that it's straightforward for him. There's about 10 or 12 species in here as well. No particular strategy. I've probably put the tougher trees on the windward sides, and the not so hardy species down in the lower ground. There's a few failures. There's 1 or 2 failures here, but in general they're doing very well. They've shot up out of the tubes, especially the cherry. The cherry are doing really, really well. I am experimenting on the very high piece there with some fast-growing softwoods, Macrocarpus cypress and western red cedar, and I've put them across on the most windward side to shelter everything on the leeward side. But the cherry in particular, I think cherry is a wonderful species. But you can see, like these trees, this cherry over here on my left is only 4 years old, so they're whistling. I think it's a great species, really high in biodiversity as well. It's got fruit and and lovely flowers in the spring, and it's great timber, burns really well. So I'm really happy with the cherry. I think I'm going to plant more of it. As well as the lamb, another prospect to create some revenue for the farm was a surprise to me. I was asked through a friend, would I consider hosting a wellness festival here, which would involve only about 150 people, very low impact, no generators or anything like that. It'll be all acoustic music, and like a weekend retreat. And I was really interested in it. They ended up having it closer to Cork City in the end. But I would definitely be open to the prospect of that in the future. In terms of farmers that would be keen on engaging with the agroforestry system, I have a good few friends that just through conversation would be potentially interested in planting agroforestry for the flexibility around the system. Obviously, it doesn't have to be in 8-meter rows either. It could be in 6-meter rows, like a friend has, or it could be. It's 400 trees per hectare is the specification from the department. So that could be 8 clumps of 50 trees or 4 clumps of 100 trees. So whatever, it's a very flexible. The department have been very flexible in the design as well. And I think that's very important to highlight to farmers that might be interested, that it's their design, and whatever works for them and their machinery. Like my garden, I built my garden around my tractors as a compact tractor. So I built the rows so that so landscape. When you're planning long term like this, I think it's important to factor in, your objectives and what you want out of it. There has been a good bit of interest in West Cork, as far as I know, by farmers that are interested in low intensive farmers, especially with sheep. And when they learn about nutrient cycling, I'm growing Rubinia here, which is a nitrogen fixer and alder. So the nitrogen that's available that's in the air in the soil is brought up into the leaves and goes through a chemical process with photosynthesis, and then when the leaves senesce and fall off, the nitrogen rots down into the soil and becomes available to the soil. And that's a really proven system for fertilizing your soil through things like species like Robinia. But I think, unfortunately, one of the setbacks that's stopping farmers, maybe, I imagine there might be two. I think we have to come away from the cultural mindset of trees or pasture, and understand that having trees on your pasture doesn't necessarily mean you have to reduce your stocking rates. There's no reason at all you have to reduce your stocking rates until maybe about year 15, or when the canopy really starts to get thick, and then you can start thinning. And like that, one of the difficulties I see is like with the contractors. I'm lucky enough to have the saws and the skill set to manage my own woodland, but what we really want is to encourage young farmers to pick up saws and to be doing the work themselves, rather than getting in contractors to do everything all the time. And I think agroforestry is a really important tool to enable farmers and young farmers to understand that the trees can work within a farming system. It doesn't have to be grass or trees. And I think the other difficulty is because agroforestry is under the forestry umbrella. The land that it's planted on is protected. The trees are protected by the Forestry Act in 2014, which states that which means that the land can never go back into pasture again. And I think that's probably an Achilles heel in I think that's one of the main reasons farmers are not engaging because I think if farmers had that agency to decide whether or not to keep the trees themselves after, let's say, 15 years, I think they should have the agency to do that, you know. But I think this could be a caveat within the grant system for agroforestry that farmers should not really have to go through a lengthy planning process and felling license or thinning license, and they should, in my opinion, have the liberty to and the agency and the liberty to turn it back into into pasture if they want. Like, honestly, one of the most fun things about these rows is motorbikes. And there's a bunch of young fellas there in Skibbereen, and they come out and visit on bikes, and the crack that we have within these rows, you know, because you're kind of bound to the rows a little bit. If you slow down, you can go across them, but I think it's great to have a place for young fellas to have a bit of fun, you know, good clean fun. If I had a little bit more land, or even a lot more land, I would definitely consider planting more agroforestry. I think it's a great system, and there's the benefits definitely outweigh any of the difficulties involved. Like at the end of the day, it's only my contractor caught in the haylage who has any difficulty, and he's totally fine with it. He's on board. So I think so long as you can get modern machinery around them, that makes a big difference to a lot of farmers.